I mentioned the Empire State Building going orange for the Bibas children who were killed most likely by Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. Orange for their orange hair, and really this like fetishization of these two children, who do need to be honored and who deserved a better life, than they got. Just as all Palestinian children, all the tens of thousands of Palestinian children, have been denied. And there's just, I mean, New York really revealing its true self there. Um, what do we want to say about the Bibas family and how their story has been exploited and weaponized and used really as a battering ram, to whip up more pro-genocide sentiment against Palestinians?
Yeah, John discussed in his report how those bodies were returned, and people can have their own views about it, but it wasn't uh, anything that looked like it was deliberately intending to denigrate them or disrespect them. And the but the sense seems to be that this family in particular is being used by the Israeli government and by its supporters around the world, particularly in the United States, to whip up a public sentiment that will support a return to the full-scale genocide in Gaza. That's, I think, the significance here. And I think it's significant, as we can see in this reporting from Wyatt Reed and Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone, that the Bibas family is actually threatening to sue the Israeli government over this official propaganda. And as they report, the relatives of an Israeli family killed while in Hamas captivity in Gaza have demanded the government stop making statements attributing blame for the killings of their loved ones and threatening to, quote, take all legal measures at their disposal if the Netanyahu administration refuses to comply. The request came 3 days after a declaration by Israeli army spokesman Daniel Hagari that Palestinian terrorists had deliberately killed two young members of the Bibas family with their bare hands. And I think, as we reported last week, the Bibas family have said that none of the details of how their loved ones died have come from official sources. They did not reveal any of this. In other words, the Israeli authorities didn't reveal any of this to the family. This is all just stuff circulating in the media. And they actually issued a public statement last week asking people to stop repeating these unconfirmed and in many cases purely fabricated details about how their loved ones died.
Including Netanyahu, who's been repeating this trope over and over again, that again, there was barbaric savages, Hamas strangling the babies to death because they hate Jews. I mean,
Right.
he's been repeating that on stage. Yeah.
And not just him. The Bibas family lawyers say in their letter, which is produced, also you can see it at the Gray Zone, quote, although it is surprising that it is necessary to request and emphasize this, we ask once again, and in every language of request, that all parties be instructed not to contact the family, nor to speak with any professional party entrusted with conducting the examinations regarding the circumstances of the murder and the condition of the deceased. In other words, they're saying, please stop using them as these media talking points. And as the Gray Zone points out, mainstream outlets from USA Today to the BBC have regurgitated the Israeli government's claim that Hamas strangled the Bibas children with their bare hands, prompting centrist hereditary influencer Meghan McCain, she's the daughter of Senator John McCain, to call to, quote, blast the people who killed this baby to hell, referring to the baby Kfir Bibas. So you can see how consent is being manufactured. And there were many examples of that from prominent US politicians, consent is being manufactured to return to the genocide. And they say that all the indications, as we've said, as John said, is that they were killed in an airstrike. And they point to an analysis by Adar Weinreb, an independent Israeli researcher and former Israeli soldier, who says that an Israeli airstrike was the most likely cause of death for Shiri and Ariel and 𝐓𝐿 Bibas. Quote, this is from the Gray Zone. While Israel claims the Bibas family was brutally murdered by terrorists, a closer look at the available evidence suggests otherwise, Weinreb wrote. Given Israel's history of misleading forensic reports, its established pattern of killing hostages in airstrikes, and the overwhelming lack of precedent for Islamist militants executing young children, I believe the most plausible explanation by a significant margin is that they were killed in an Israeli airstrike. That's the end of that quote from Weinreb. Furthermore, quote, he says, the available evidence does not support the claim that young children were systematically targeted by Hamas. Again, that's Adar Weinreb. He says that on October 7th, children under 13 were killed at a rate approximately 7 times lower than their share of the population, and that children under 5, like the Bibas children, were killed at a rate of approximately 11 times lower than their share of the population. So he says also, among the 80-plus released hostages, the single most consistent testimony is their constant fear of being killed by Israeli airstrikes. Again, that's Adar Weinreb, this Israeli analyst quoted by the Gray Zone. And the latest to do that, Tamara, I put this out of place, and maybe we don't need to show it, but released Israeli captive Noa Argamani spoke at a session of the UN Security Council, and she described surviving an Israeli airstrike on the house where she was held. Let's listen to that clip.
I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I thought it's going to be my last second of my life. I screamed so loud so someone would hear me. And I heard Yossi screaming too. But after a few seconds, I stopped hearing from Yossi.
Yeah, and just to make clear, this comes from about a 10-minute speech that she gave. Of course, I listened to the whole thing to make sure that of the context of what she's saying, and she is describing this airstrike that killed another Israeli captive, Yossi Sharabi, and injured another one called 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, who she alleges was killed by Hamas a few days later. I don't know whether that's been confirmed one way or another. He might have been injured in the airstrike, but she alleges that he was killed. And what's also interesting about her comments, and this sort of takes us into the discussion about the ceasefire, is that her presence there appears to have been sponsored by the Israeli government. From what I can see, she's sitting next to the Israeli ambassador, and even though she's talking about an Israeli airstrike that she narrowly survived and that killed Yossi Sharabi, she gives this very, as you would expect, pro-Israel account. She's not there to express any sympathy for Palestinians whatsoever. And yet, she says that the ceasefire deal has to continue, the second phase has to go ahead, and this is the only way to bring the rest of the captives out. So it's very interesting that the Israeli government is sponsoring or promoting a speaker at the UN who is pushing for the implementation of the full implementation of the ceasefire deal, the same ceasefire deal that Israel is violating in numerous ways, particularly by keeping aid and shelter out of Gaza, tents and mobile homes and so on, and also appears to be undermining in public and stalling the second phase negotiations that, as John has pointed out, was supposed to start weeks ago.